Riddle me this, does the world really need another baby buggy? To car guys and gals like you and I, the answer would be unequivocally no, nada, niet. However, you and I were in the minority nowadays, not just because every car manufacturer in the world tells us we are wrong. It is because everybody who buys cars nowadays tells us we are wrong. And it's not in the usual areas where people want like 3 rows that have a lot of space for packaging a lot of people and a lot of dogs. Apparently, the new thing nowadays that everybody buys is something that's shorter with only 2 rows, that's smaller. I don't get it, but this is what people buy. So you and I have to look at the latest one, and while it's not exactly a GTI, it is von Deutschland. So let's start with the obvious. It looks almost identical to something Volkswagen already makes called the Tiguan. However, there are some differences. The biggest would be the size of the vehicle, specifically the length and the wheelbase. It's a little over 9 inches shorter, and that change comes from the rear seat. So if you look at a Tiguan, it looks like it has a longer rear door, almost like this is the short wheelbase version. And in reality, everything is smaller. However, something very important is not smaller, at least not that much smaller, and that would be the cargo capacity. Believe it or not, this is only about 1 cubic foot lower in cargo capacity in the rear with the seats up. With the seats down, it's almost 66 cubic feet of cargo capacity. Okay, now that we got the practicality out of the way, let's focus on the output figure. It's 158 horsepower and 184 pound-feet of torque. That sounds significantly lower than a Tiguan. And it is because it is not the EA 888 4-cylinder. Instead, it is a 1.5 turbocharged 4-cylinder. And something very interesting happens. There is a front-wheel drive model, that's the basic car. That's an 8-speed torque converter automatic. However, the car you and I are driving is an all-wheel drive, and when one goes all-wheel drive, the transmission changes to something that we prefer from the GTI, and that would be a 7-speed dual clutch. Now, something that I, a Porsche guy, finds rather fascinating, no matter the transmission, is the fuel economy. Here, considering this is a box on wheels, it's more than respectable. The front-wheel drive with the 8-speed torque converter automatic, 28, 36, 31 combined, change it to that 7-speed dual clutch with the all-wheel drive. The numbers go down by 3 mpg in either case. Actually, on the highway, goes down by 4 mpg. Let's kick off today with some good news. Even though this is a baby buggy, it is relatively lightweight, 3,430 pounds, or depending on the express your weights and measures, 1,556 kilograms. Something rather pertinent we need to cover. This is all-wheel drive, which means it is 255 pounds heavier than if it were front-wheel drive. With that. Oh yeah, that's a bit of a delay there. But then again, were we expecting a GTI? Not exactly. It delivers power in a leisurely way. It works moderately well around town. I did not expect it to be a fire-breathing monster up here, and frankly, it shouldn't be. This is something to cart the rugrats and the dogs around. But something I did notice, besides this software update, which keeps on coming up and it's very annoying, there are different modes for the throttle mapping. There's no adjustable dampers, I wouldn't expect it here. However, in the most basic mode around town, there is a delay in the way it delivers power, and it's intrusive. It's something that needs to be adjusted. I would say you either drive it in sport mode, not because you want to be sporty, but because it's better at dealing with stop and go, especially in a city like Los Angeles or New York, than in the regular mode. Now, putting that one small request aside, let's get into the transmission, because there, it's a bright spot. It works well with the smaller 1.5 turbo engine, in that the dual clutch, it's matched in personality. It keeps it in the proper rev range to the point where you're driving it, at least in sport mode, and the transmission makes up for some of the odd throttle mapping. And that brings us to driving dynamics, and here this is all about ride quality. It's not really about pitch, squat, dive, and roll. And the first thing we've got to discuss is the wheel sizes. Here I applaud Volkswagen in making this realistic in choice. It starts with a 17-inch wheel, moves up to an 18, you and I are driving a 19-inch wheel. And even in this case, the ride quality, I would say, is supple. It works incredibly well around town, and that is something that's difficult in a vehicle of this size. Remember, it's shorter than a Tiguan, and when you have a shorter wheelbase or a shorter vehicle, it usually disturbs the ride quality. And I would argue it's a big function of the choice of the rear suspension, at least in the all-wheel drive. So in the front-wheel drive vehicle, that sadly is saddled with a torsion beam rear suspension. Let me put this to you in a bit of a different light. It is abundantly clear that the remit of this vehicle from Volkswagen Engineering was to transport a good amount of people, not a lot considering the size of the vehicle, and some dogs, not huge dogs, again considering the size of the vehicle, and do so without disturbing them, even as someone drives it aggressively. And something that works in conjunction with that is the steering. Now, is it the steering lifted directly from a GTI? No, it's not trying to be, but it's reminiscent of Volkswagens that are more fun to drive. So bringing that all together, it's, yes, a two-row SUV, but it's a better equation on this theme than others in the same realm. Yes, it is indeed that time again to play your favorite game on the Options Game with today's contestant, a slightly less practical interpretation of a practical equation of a four-wheeled conveyance, also known as the 2022 Volkswagen Taos SEL all-wheel drive for a base price of $33,045. Now, I do feel it prudent to point out two rather pertinent facts. Number one, if this was front-wheel drive, which can be had in the fancy SEL, it would be $1,055 cheaper. However, if it was front-wheel drive in the most basic Taos, it would be significantly cheaper. $22,995. And something I find fascinating about that, there are things that are fitted as standard to a Taos I wouldn't expect. Remember the digital cockpit, which itself was only in fancy Volkswagens, and that was pilfered from Audi. That's fitted as standard to all Taos models. Granted, not navigation, but at least the digital cockpit is fitted as standard. Nice touch there. Now, I do need to press on to something about this specific car here. There was negotiation as to which color would be sent to us. Kumo originally negotiated a dark blue, which would have been lovely. I simply said, can we have one with a sunroof? They said, no, we don't have one with a sunroof. However, we got this cool blue. They call it cornflower blue. You do not pay extra for it. But to me, this is going to sound like sacrilege. However, that looks very close to shark blue from that 992 GT3 we drove about a month ago. Then the inside of the car is black and gray. It works with the pseudo shark blue, but can we have like more of a contrast, maybe just gray all the way through, or perhaps a saddle that would work great with this exterior color. And then there are really no factory options. Yes, one can have a panoramic sunroof here. It would cost an additional $1,200. Sadly, I didn't get that. However, Kumo did pull out a can opener, so we're gonna fix that a bit later. Then the only other thing we add here is the destination and handling from Puebla, Mexico for $1,195 for a total retail price of $34,240. Arguably, the most important aspects of vehicles like these would be the interior. And here they've done a number of things to make it a better place to be, but it's still a mixed bag. Like specifically, the tactile feel is very different from the front into the back. It's not just like a top-down thing as we've discussed in other episodes, where the build quality of some of the materials, it degrades as you get lower into the vehicle. Here it degrades as you get to the back. Like in the front, it's a pretty nice place to be. I mean, it's very Germanic, but it's a pretty nice place to be with good tactile feel here. It's soft touch even on the doors as well. However, the rear doors, it's not good. It's super hard tactile points. I don't understand why they don't include this all the way through, because this is the kind of vehicle where you're going to have people in the back seat. Wouldn't you want to show them the same level of tactile feel throughout the entire vehicle? That's something that confuses me a little bit. And then overall design, and this is something that's really important as of late with Volkswagen, because you and I have driven, what, the ID4, the new GTI, and it has that maddening UX system. Here, they've kept the older UX And I'm going to make a plea to Volkswagen here. Let's continue with this, not the new one from the ID4. At least let's take the better parts of this and blend it with what you're trying to accomplish with the new UX in the ID system, like real knobs, real controls that actually have feel. Like, for example, here I can make a change to a key control in the vehicle and I don't have to take my eyes off the road, and that's repeated also through the steering wheel. There are real buttons on the steering wheel, so I can make changes to the volume or the radio or cruise control, even fool with the digital cockpit, changes between a map and the regular view, all without having to feel haptic feedback or capacitive touch. This is just so much better, not just in terms of overall UX design, but it's significantly safer, and this is just my open letter to Volkswagen to please, oh please, oh please, somehow adopt this into future designs of your UX. The following may come as a surprise to some of you, but this, it's very good. It's way better than I thought it would be, but here's the catch, it's not 35 grand good. This one is the fancy one, it's lovely, but for 35 grand, there's many other types of vehicles one can have for the same money. Not really crossovers, but types of vehicles that I think would do a better job than this. That brings us back to that starting point we talked about in the options game of what, $23,000, and that's really not the sweet spot. My guess the sweet spot is the all-wheel drive, and not just because someone would need all-wheel drive in foul weather, rather because the all-wheel drive brings about the dual clutch and the multi-link rear suspension, which really makes this the more Germanic of the crossover world, and that's why it stands out, which brings us to the wish list here. And I really have nothing that I can offer beyond what we talked about with the UX and something else we talked about in the Tiguan episode last week, and that would be, let's do this mild hybrid system that we've seen in so many other Volkswagen Group cars. Now, my guess is that could bring the price up. However, what if we were to do it in a bit of a different way, where we change the engine? Maybe it's an even smaller engine, maybe it's a 3-cylinder engine, but something with an integrated starter generator motor, which would make it A, more reliable, less moving parts, and B, more fuel efficient. For around the same money, that's kind of what would be really the sweet spot. And this is the episode where I turn this around to you guys to opine in the comments below or via our social media, MotoManTV, all one word, MotoManTV, all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, I want to leave an open letter to the folks at Volkswagen. Lovely that you sent this, what, corn something or other color that looks a lot like shark blue. However, next time, send one with a sunroof, because I literally had to pull a can opener out of Kumo's paw. So until I see you in the next episode, be später.